Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Abbott and Costello Meet the Podcast. I'm Jerry Shario. Today we're going to be discussing Buck Privates Come Home. And I will be discussing it along with a man who is like a limited edition snack. Rare, irresistible, and definitely not for everybody. Nick Santamaria.
Wow. A lot of thought went into that one. That's incredible. And no, I'm not for everybody because I've lost weight recently. And I don't think there's enough for everybody. So
Not enough to go around, no.
I'm sorry about that. And especially to go around because it's not around anymore.
Yeah.
So, around is row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Everybody, merrily, 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 someone give me cream. All right.
Cream.
I was singing about my coffee. But anyway, Jerry, it's so good to see
and you as well. You as well, Nick. I'm so happy to see you, especially after your little adventure.
I had a little adventure. Actually, it was quite a big adventure.
Yeah.
I actually went to Albania for almost 2 weeks to check out whether it was a good place to settle and retire. I'm not ready for that yet, but when the time comes, I am looking at places that financially you could live very comfortably out of our own insane economy. And it's not like I'm poor. I'm not looking like, I can't afford the blah. I want the most for my money during my final chapter, It turns out that it was a kind of impenetrable language. I could not get any hang of it. I learned how to say road. Road is ruga. R-R-U-G-A. I learned that. You nod your head yes for no and no for yes.
What?
This is it's like out of Abbott and Costello. It's true. That's what they do. This means no.
Oh my goodness.
It's very strange. But they don't smile a lot. It is a recently democratic country. They were communist up until 1993. Some say 91. I forget. So they're not especially happy-go-lucky, let's dance, down the street. They don't smile. I tried to smile at people, and I was afraid I was going to be arrested. I got lost a lot because very few people speak English. At one point, I had to knock on a policeman's window, the car window, and ask, "Do you speak English?" And he did. He spoke a little bit, and he got me home, luckily. So yeah, it was quite an adventure, but it's not the place I'm going to land, and my search continues. And Jerry?
Yes.
I've been thinking a lot about Oregon.
Good for you.
Mm-hmm. Which is where you are.
Yeah, I'm just north of there, but yeah.
Yeah, that area.
This is a lovely little corner of the country, I have to say. I came from the exact opposite corner of the country, originally from Boston. And I've been here, 27 years now. 25 years, sorry. 25 years here in Washington State. And Pacific Northwest, highly recommend it. I don't know if your money's going to go further here or not.
Well, it depends on where I land. I'm trying to find a nice little college town.
Oh, yeah.
Because college towns tend to be a little cheaper because they're attracting the students to live in the area. And I would have a place to teach, do my lectures and an occasional show. I'm sure there would be a theater, but I'm looking. I'm looking, and people have been very nice, and they've been sending in suggestions and all of that. The only thing is, one of my main criteria is I can't stand heat and humidity. I know I live in Florida, but it's for a purpose. I'm taking care of my mom. But once that's over, goodbye, Florida, and I'm off. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm kind of ill. If you hear me sniffling or having to run to the restroom, that means that I'm sniffling and having to run to the restroom. So I just wanted to let you know that. And we're going to move along. I'm bravely going to move forward on this one. Okay?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
And Jerry, how are you progressing in your life?
Progressing nicely. About
Progress,
2 weeks into rehearsals of a big musical that we're working on here. And
it's called Something Rotten.
Yes, it is. And it's not. It's actually something very nice.
I had a few friends in the Broadway production, in the original production.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's a great show, and it's thus far been a very enjoyable experience.
I'm so glad because we know how those things can turn out. you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, we were talking about it, and Jerry says that they're giving him songs with a very, very high register rather than baritone. So he's like, you know, up there. But it's okay.
Goodness.
I'm sure you can handle it.
Well, yeah, we'll see. You know, thankfully, we're only doing, you know, one show a day when we finally get into performance. Because, you know,
one show a day, wimps!
I know.
My goodness.
The last big musical I did, we were like 8 shows a week.
That's welcome to Broadway.
And being, you know, dark one day.
I don't know about your pigmentation, but yes, I didn't realize this was done in blackface. But okay. You know, it's just your menstrual cycle. That's all. All right. So that was a good joke. That was a good bloody joke. All right. So we are talking about a film, interesting film, the only sequel they ever made. And like The Godfather Part 2, I would say this sequel measures up to the original, if not surpasses it. Now, I know some people are very attached to Buck Privates, and for good reason. You know, it's their first big hit and great routines and the Andrews Sisters and all of that. But as a film, I think Buck Privates Come Home is better. And I think that their characters are more developed. They're a bit more mature, the way they relate to each other. And this is coming off 2 films that were so unusual, where they actually got to act and show different levels of where they could go and what they could do. And to me, in this film, despite what my friend Matthew Coniam writes in his chapter, he feels like this is the film that it's their duck soup before they went to MGM. That's how he looks at it. He thinks that this is their last important film, but he's also not a fan of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which is one of the more perfect films ever made. Yeah. So anyway, did I mention to you, Jerry, that we might be doing a 2-parter for Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein?
No, you did not.
I think I'd like to do one just between you and I, and then I would like to invite a few people to come in and talk about it and what this film means to them. But anyway, we'll get to that, and you know, I'm sure everybody now is at the edge of their seats because they have very narrow chairs. So we are talking about Buck Privates Come Home, and those words "Buck Privates" is in the title. And this is a very interesting film in the sense that it's happened during a transition, not for Abbott and Costello, although it is. They came off 2 serious films, and now they're back to being Bud and Lou. But Universal was taken over by Louis B. Mayer's son-in-law, William Getz is his name, and his partner, Leo Spitz. And I don't know if that's a description or his actual name. But where he spits, no grass grew, because Universal became Universal International here around this film. And there's some changes involved here. They tried to take Universal. Okay, Universal was making a fortune with Abbott and Costello movies, with horror movies, and, B pictures, serials, westerns, real gut bucket, films for the people. And then these 2 jokers come in, and they decide that they're going to class up Universal. So what do? They immediately contract for British films to come in and to release to the public. I believe they did 6 of them this year. They brought 6 of them over. And then they started getting rid of their B unit. All the horror movies were gone. The westerns were gone. The serials were gone. They kept Abbott and Costello because they made money. But they didn't give a crap about Abbott and Costello. In fact, they didn't want to touch them. They were too good. They were just too good, these people. They owned artwork. And I just wonder if Lou tried to steal any of it. But, hey, what do I do with this Mona Lisa thing? So anyway, they came in, and just to get to cut to the chase, in 1946, I believe it was, or 45, Universal profited by over $4 million. They were doing very, very well. That was a lot of money back then. Yeah. And after Universal International took over, they lost over $3 million that year. So right away, Ma and Pa Kettle were asked back Francis the Talking Mule, all the bread and butter things that the public loved, including Abbott and Costello. So what did they do? They hired a new producer. This is a first-time producer, a very important one in their career. His name is Robert Arthur. Now, Robert Arthur was born in 1909 in New York City, passed away in 1986 at the age of 76. His real name was Robert Arthur Feder, F-E-D-E-R. Mm-hmm. He graduated college in California, a college boy, and he started working for the oil industry in 1929. And we know how great finances were in 1929. He floundered for a while, was a creative guy, started writing for MGM in 1937. Before you know it, he was off in World War II, where he produced over 600 training films while there. When he got out, Universal offered him a job. He wanted to go back to MGM, but Universal was going to make him a producer, whereas MGM was going to keep him as a writer. So he kind of leaned towards Universal. Now, here's where Robert Arthur is full of dookie. He told the story that he came up with the original idea for Buck Privates Come Home. He was being demobbed out of, the service at that point, and his wife was best friends with Eddie Muhl, M-U-H-L. He was, at that time, he worked like in the accounting office at Universal. But anyway, the wives were friendly, and he had just mentioned, boy, this would be a great idea for Abbott and Costello, because they, originally were the Buck Privates, and now they could be Buck Privates Coming Home. Well, sorry, Robert, but this was worked on by the original writer of Buck Privates, Arthur Horman, back in 1945, before Robert Arthur was even mentioned or thought of at Universal. So sorry, Arthur. Everybody's like trying to make themselves seem more important in this story. Yeah. Okay, Robert Arthur. So he ended up doing six more movies, or no, he did 6 complete Abbott and Costello movies, including what I consider to be their best. And he did not really understand how to deal with burlesque guys. He said that Bud was a sweetheart. He loved dealing with Bud because Bud was just acquiesced. He said Lou was more demanding. He said that as a trio, Bud, Lou, and Eddie Sherman came to the office and said, we want better writers. We just want better writers. We want better scripts. And that was coming off The Time of Their Lives, which was a wonderful script. Yeah. So Robert Arthur went right to work, and he hires a guy by the name of Richard McCaulay. Richard McCaulay, also born in 1909, didn't live quite as long. He died when he was 60 at 1969. He wrote some of my favorite movies at Warner Brothers. Joey Brown's last for Warner Brothers was Polo Joe. He wrote When's Your Birthday for Joey Brown after he left Warner Brothers. He wrote my 2 favorite Ted Healy movies, Varsity Show and Hollywood Hotel, both wonderful entertainment. He wrote one of my favorite movies, or he wrote on one of my all-time favorite movies, The Roaring Twenties from 1939. James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, Priscilla Lane, Irving Schmelman. No, I made that up. So he wrote on that. And he also wrote on a few of my other favorite movies, Brother Orchid with Edward G. Robinson and Humphrey Bogart, Torrid Zone with James Cagney and Ann Sheridan and Pat O'Brien, sort of a partial remake of The Front Page, which takes place on a banana plantation. It's fabulous. Let's see. He also wrote Manpower with Edward G. and George Raft and Marlene Dietrich, and one of my all-time favorite Abbott and Costello imitation movies, Navy Blues, with Jack Oakey and Jack Haley and Martha Ray and Ann Sheridan. Ooga. So Richard McCaulay had quite a background in writing wonderful movies. Unfortunately, he was asking and getting $2,000 a week. That's a lot in 1946 money. And he worked sluggishly. He was very, very slow. So one of the first things Robert Arthur did after hiring Richard McCaulay was firing Richard McCaulay. who turned out to be a real one of those commie haters. That he was a big noise in the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, along with Bond.
Yeah.
And he also listed a full list of names for the House Un-America Committee of idiotic people. So much for Richard McCaulay. So what did they do? They handed it to the A-team, and that was John Grant, Robert Lees, and Fred Ronaldo. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to them and a few stories about that. But there's another person that I wanted to mention, and this guy was let go right after this movie. And that was the great makeup artist, Jack Pierce. Mm. He did the makeup for this film and was unceremoniously let go because he was too old-fashioned. So they hired Bud Westmore from the Westmore family, who was working at, grade Z movies for much lesser studios. But he came in and he made everything faster. Everything became, rubber masks and stuff like that. The yak hair that Jack Pierce used was a thing of the past. Yeah. And so was Jack, unfortunately. But he did a lot of stuff afterwards. I mean, not on the same level, but he did a few things. Most interestingly, he was called back to do the Frankenstein monster makeup for Boris Karloff in the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty with Danny Kaye. And this would have been one of the fantasies, the actual Frankenstein monster and the real one.
Yeah.
And despite the photographs from the makeup sessions, that's all we have to go by. I actually probably would have liked the film if this scene were in it, but I'm afraid I don't. I always root for Gordon Jones, Mike the Cop. I always root for him to kick the crap out of Danny Kaye. So sue me. Now, this is my favorite part of the Jack Pierce story. Arthur Lubin, our friend Arthur Lubin from the early days of the Abbott and Costello movies, he became in charge of the Francis the Talking Mule series, and eventually produced and directed Mr. Ed, also about a talking horse. I mean, who better than Arthur Lubin? And what did Arthur Lubin do? Mr. Mensch himself, he hired Jack Pierce for 4 years straight on the Mr. Ed television show. So Jack worked. He worked. Nice. Born in 1889 as Yanis Pikoulis in Greece, which made him rather slippery. And he was born in 1889 and passed away in 1968. And I remember that day. I remember his obituary. That was a sad day for us monster kids. Yeah. All right. So we're going to look at the film now. We've got the background story pretty much told. So this is a sequel. And they could have very well shot themselves in the foot, much like Preston Sturges with The Sin of Harold Diddlebach. Yeah. Right? Showing the scenes from The Freshman at the beginning of the film, which was so far superior to anything that followed that it really, you feel kind of disappointed afterwards. Yep. So that could have happened because this movie begins showing the classic Thai salesman bit from Buck Privates, and then goes into the drill routine, which is one of the more hilarious scenes ever put on film, as far as I know. I'm laughing again. I was watching it, and I'm laughing all over again. I can't help it. It's just so funny.
It doesn't matter how many times I see it. Every time Lou says, "What time is it?" I lose it. I lose it completely.
It's absolutely hilarious. And it's not a funny line. It's just something he tried to throw Bud off with. And Bud was right there, boy.
Right there.
None of your business. I love when Lou is waving to the guys in the background. Yeah. While Bud's doing this thing, Lou's waving to the guys, and nobody's responding because I think they were told not to.
Yeah.
But it was very, very funny. So we start off with that old footage and goes into the European set. I should say the outdoor European set at Universal Studios, where every monster walked through, every Sherlock Holmes building walked through. I mean, this is like one of the more familiar sets of all time. And they use it beautifully here. They're marching. The troops won the war, and they're marching out. You know, they're in Europe, and they're ready to go home. And of course, Lou's belt falls to his feet, and he trips for the first time in this movie. It's a running gag, actually a walking gag, or a marching gag.
A marching gag.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it was, he didn't have a chance to tell it. I just heard that on their radio show. It's the same. It's such an old joke.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing brought up about this film, which you might find interesting, Jerry, because we're both big Laurel and Hardy fans.
Yes.
This movie is compared to Pack Up Your Troubles. Think about it. They go away to war.
Yep.
They come back. They have to find Eddie's, grandparents or parents because they have the little girl with them. And it's all about them coming home and trying to reestablish themselves with this appendage, with this little girl. That's about as much comparison as I can make, really.
Yeah.
But it is there. And it is familiar to our British friends out there. There's a George Formby movie. In fact, it was his last film. He got, like Abbott and Costello got America through the war with their comedy. George Formby did it in England with his movies and concerts and entertaining the troops and all of that. A movie called George in Civvy Street, of course, civilian street. And it's all about him coming home. It opens with a big song on the ship. And eventually he's left a kind of like a nightclub, and all his buddies from the army come and help him fix it up. And it sounds, kind of familiar.
Yeah.
But this was going on. It was very prescient. It was very topical. A friend of mine got in touch with me and said, well, this movie, I kind of look at it, it seems like it's for kids. And I said to him, really? You think kids would know the historical importance of them coming home from World War II and what they fought against and what they had to deal with when they got home, and the whole $4,000 loan thing, which was going on for real? No, this was a movie made for adults that children enjoyed as well. Yeah. And I count myself as one of them. Right, Jerry?
I agree completely. Yeah, because there is so much topical material, as you've said, not the least being all of the demobbed veterans and the benefits and trying to get back into society. No kid could follow that. No.
It is definitely not a kid's film. Now, I could see where Matthew Coniam in our book, he's not crazy about Abbott and Costello because he feels that was the time when their movies became more for children. Actually, he thought the ones after this one, which meant Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap, which is a Western, a straight Western with Abbott and Costello in it, written for Jimmy Stewart originally. I mean, no, I'm sorry. People dying and getting shot and falling from things. No, it's an adult film that children can appreciate. And then, of course, The Noose Hangs High. They're dealing with a killer, a gang of killers. I mean, oh boy, this is real childlike stuff.
And horse racing, betting on races. Yeah. I know a number of 10-year-olds who really enjoy that sort of topic. Yeah.
I can see them sitting there. It's like, Mom, is that a long shot? It's not. It's just not for kids. I mean, I was a kid and I loved it, but I also had a curiosity about history. You know what I mean? And I would look up things that I didn't understand. There was something I wanted to mention before I forget. Why did Bud's name change? He was Smitty in Buck Privates, and now all of a sudden he's Slicker. Maybe he's just a slicker version of Smitty. I don't know.
I would have to rewatch it again. But I did notice that, but I think at one point where they get introduced, maybe at the bank, they're introduced as Herbie Brown and Slicker Smith.
Right.
I think.
Yes, his last name is Smith.
Yeah. And so, going from Smitty to Slicker, I don't know.
Maybe they got to know him in the army.
Ooh, there you go.
Then he became Slicker, after he took, the whole barrack in a crap game. And Bud would do that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We open the movie proper with a song. And it's a song that I'll have to be honest with you. It's called We're Going Home. We're going home. We're going home.
Every son of a gun of a one of us know we're going home. No more uniforms to wear. No more sergeants in our hair. No peeling a spread or hiking in mud. We left that over there. We're going home. We're going home.
Every son of a one of a gun of a says we're going home. It's that kind of a song, and it's really catchy. And I used to sing it all the time when I would get finished with a gig and I was going home. I'm going home. I'm going home. Honestly, I doubt many people did that.
I am laughing out of recognition.
Oh,
Yes.
see?
Guilty as charged, my friend. Yes.
And it's so much fun.
Yeah.
I have to say. And then you get to Nat Pendleton, who, let's face it, we love Nat Pendleton. And boy, does he take it in this movie. He's a bit bigger, he's put on a little weight.
Yeah.
And he's still after Costello, left, right, to the rhythm of the song that's being played. A really nice touch. But they're still at it, the two of them. They're still mortal enemies. But Lou bumps into a guy at one point who just starts spouting off in a language that is completely indecipherable.
What are you talking about? I don't know.
That was Joe Plosky. And I know all of you are familiar with Joe Plosky, and you've got all the films and everything else. Joe Plosky was born in 1904 in Poland, and he lived 89 years. He died in 1993. He was in vaudeville for a while. He was a stooge for the great nightclub comedian Joe E. Louis, portrayed by Frank Sinatra in the movie The Joker's Wild. He was on Broadway for the first time in 1932. He did early shows before they were famous, with Danny Kaye and Imogene Coca. That was for Max Liebman, who was very big in the Catskills, Tenement, that whole thing.
Yeah.
He started making his first movies in 1936. During World War II, he was a mess hall cook for the duration. Polish food, I wonder. Polish sausage again? And his final film was Airport from 1970, and then he retired and had a great quarter of a century. But he's very funny in his one appearance in this film. He has literally like 20 seconds in the film, and he's so memorable to me.
Yes.
It's a good laugh. It really is a good laugh. Now, the first laugh, other than the drill routine, where I completely lose it, is where Lou is exiting where he's working on the ship on that level, and Don Porter comes in and opens the iron door right on Lou's head, and Lou disappears. It's just, you just hear clong, and you know that he's like 3 sheets to the wind. But yeah, Don Porter, great to see him. We haven't seen him since Who Done It, where he plays a very important role. And he is the superior officer of Nat Pendleton, and poor Nat. So anyway, that's my biggest, that I just scream when I see that. In fact, there's a couple of moments where Lou walks into something that I just lose it. No one did that better than he did.
No. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
I remember teaching my cousin how to do a Lou Costello head bump against a wall. And basically you hit your knee and you throw your head back like you hit your head.
Yep.
Unfortunately, in my grandmother's house, I put a hole in the wall with my knee. And for all I know, it still may be there, although I know, I felt terrible. And what do you tell them? Well, I was teaching them how to bump your head against the wall. Just not good. Anyway, he goes down into their barracks on the ship where they are. And of course, Bud is running a card game when he comes in. But there's going to be an inspection, and they have to show everything they're taking home, every souvenir, whatever. And Lou has a camera that is actually a time bomb. And Bud says, a time bomb, that could be dangerous. He says, no, it's not dangerous. If you press this, nothing happens. You press this, nothing happens. But never press this. And of course, he presses it. And it starts ticking. Now, this starts a very funny thing that has its roots in earlier comedies, including Hit the Ice. Right? I'll explain. So Bud's like, get rid of it. And of course, they're throwing it back and forth, and the clock is ticking, and it's very suspenseful. So finally, Bud says, throw it out the porthole. And Lou's like, the porthole? You mean the closet. And he opens the porthole. No, he doesn't. He can't open it. It's locked. So he runs outside, climbs down, and you see this from inside the barracks, and he opens he unlocks the thing, runs back downstairs with the camera, opens up the porthole, and throws it out, almost right at the right time. And Bud's like, "Why didn't you throw it when you were outside on the ship?" He goes, "Well, you told me to throw it out the window." So basically, that was them breaking into the house during Hit the Ice. You said you wanted to come in through the window, when he finds the door open. Laurel and Hardy did this way back in Scram in 1932. But any way you look at it, it's funny stuff. So Don Porter comes down to do the inspection, and he sees the window open. He sees the porthole open, and he walks over. He says, "Boy, it looks like it might rain." And he turns around, and of course, the thing explodes and hits him with a ton of water. And they do a little risque. Never mind the rain, we're going to catch hail. But anyway, we are then introduced to a major plot point. Maybe the most major plot point is Little Evie, and her character's name, I found out, is Yvette Lebrac. Yvette Lebrac. But she's Little Evie, and she's coming from France. You can tell by her absolutely indistinguishable French accent. She sounds like she's, on break from school in Santa Monica. But anyway, she's terrific. She is one of my favorite child actors, in fact. There's no treacle. There's no bad sentiment. She just gives a straightforward, excellent performance. This could have been a very treacly, aspect of the film, but it is played completely straight and completely without treacle. It is just beautifully done. And you got to thank Charles Barton for a lot of that, for his second time directing The Boys. And she does great. So that's Beverly Simmons, by the way. Not much about her. She was born in 1938 in Alamosa, Colorado, and she lived to 2003. She passed away in Springfield, Oregon. Speaking of Oregon, only made a few films in the 40s before this one. Frontier Gal with Yvonne DiCarlo, Little Miss Big, Cuban Pete. Guess who was in that with her? Desi Arnaz. And she never married, and she never had children. Maybe I should reverse those. I guess she never had children and she never married.
There you go.
But anyway, she gives a marvelous performance in this film as Little Evie. So Lou and Little Evie are attached at the hip. Bud is also there. He's Uncle Bud. But Uncle Bud is a bit more realistic. What are we going to do when we get her home? We're a couple of bums. We're tie salesmen on the street. We're going to take care of a little girl. So anyway, Sergeant Collins, Nat Pendleton, has to take command and give her to the immigration office. And there we meet Joan Falon, also known as Joan Shawlee, Shawlee. Now, I don't know about you, Jerry, but I always felt that, like Ann Gillis, that Lou had her under contract, because he did that. He did that with Ann Gillis. He did it with Dean Martin, paid for his nose job. So I thought maybe this was one of those situations, because I had read that Bud and Lou discovered her dancing at the Copacabana in the chorus. And they suggested her to Universal. She got a contract, and this was her first big film, blah, blah, blah. Well, all of it's a lie. All of it is made up by the, Universal publicity department. And it turns out that Joan Falon, born in 1926, only lived to 1987. She had a short life, breast cancer, in fact, I believe. She was born in Forest Hills, New York, a very familiar place for me. The family moved to Vancouver when she was 5. Then she drifted back to New York. When she was 14 years old, she became a model for the John Robert Powers Agency. The Powers Agency was one of the biggest in New York. And then she started doing Broadway under the name Joyce Ring, like Cyril Ring, Joyce Ring. She was in 2 Rodgers and Hart musicals. One was By Jupiter, which I'm happy to report I got to play the Ray Bolger role in that show in a production in LA, and a revival of their 1920s show, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Oh. Now, she didn't have large roles. In fact, my buddy Miriam Nelson was part of Connecticut Yankee, and so was bunch of other people, actually. She started out with June Allison and Vera Ellen and that whole group. Yep. But anyway, so she did those. But then she had a short career at 20th Century Fox in the early 40s. They didn't do much with her, so she moved on, got a contract with Universal, made about 10 films before this one. But most interestingly, I always wondered where Shaw Lee came in. You know, mm-hmm. Joan Falon was the name. I just assumed she thought it was a little too plain, so she thought up this fanciful name, Shaw Lee. It turns out that was her first husband's last name, so she just took her husband's name. Ah. Yeah. It didn't last, but the name did. She got the name. And, you know, she went on. She was Billy Wilder's favorite, one of his favorites. She was in The Apartment. She was, of course, most famously in Sun Like It Hot as Sweet Sue. She was in Irma La Douce and, unfortunately, in Buddy Buddy. Oh, boy. If you ever thought to be Buddy Buddy, you would not be Buddy Buddy with Billy Wilder. It's pretty terrible. But anyway, the other three are pretty much considered, well, Irma La Douce is tough to get through. So she had a long career with that. She also appeared on the Abbott and Costello show a few times, most famously in the courtroom scene in the game show. Where he's positive. That's Joan Falon.
Yes.
And she's just wonderful. She was just wonderful. Anyway, so we meet her, and she's Aunt Sylvia to little Evie, and she's going to take charge of little Evie until the actual immigration people take her to the office where she will be transferred to another ship home. Okay, so the troops, this used to get me when I was a kid. Lou gets another great speech. Like his speech in Keep 'Em Flying, you know, where we want to be part of the team, and I was always too fat to be part of the team. Yes. In this one, he says to Sergeant Collins,
Sergeant, I know I don't know my right foot from my left, but I do know right from wrong. And if you send Evie back, that's wrong.
So Lou gets to show off his acting talent once again, and that's what I love about this movie. They are Bud and Lou. Bud and Lou are back. There's even a couple of slaps.
Look, Slicker, if it'll make you feel any better, slap me right in the face. Right here in this face.
Get away from me.
Go ahead, Slicker. Come on, it'll make me feel better if you slap me in the face right there.
Told you to get away from me, didn't I?
Slicker, this is the only thing I've ever asked you to do for me. Slap me in the face, right there. And I had to coax him for it.
And they are back. But there is room for some reality. There is room for some acting and to actually pay heed to the plot of this film. And I really enjoy these movies. I really enjoy these character-driven movies, situational movies, as much as I enjoy the crazier ones from the early days that were pretty much sewn together. This is another scene that used to make me really sad when I was a kid. Everybody was singing. All the boys are singing. We're going home. We're going home, and it's very happy and joyous. And everybody leaves, and there's Lou by himself without little Evie, knowing he's probably not going to see her again. And he slowly gets up and he does his little walk out, very slowly and very sadly. Yep. I don't understand people that don't like pathos, that don't like comedians that can handle pathos without making you retch. Lou was in that group. He was in that group with Chaplin and a few others that were just, wonderful to watch in that sense. Yeah. So they leave, and this starts the whole demobbing situation, which I absolutely love. They're online to get demobbed, to separate from the army and get their papers to leave. It's a long line. And they do a couple of their old chestnuts. John Grant, his fingerprints are all over this. And we see very briefly William Ching. I love his name, William Ching. He must have made some sort of an impression. I think he's only got one line in this movie, but he comes back as the leading man in Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap, their very next film. He also, most famously, was the pain-in-the-neck boyfriend that used to intimidate Katharine Hepburn in Pat and Mike with Spencer Tracy as well. He's really good in that, too. But anyway, they're still on the ship at this point. I forgot this whole scene. They do the kitchen doors. Now, John Grant is back. And, of course, there are the in and out doors at the, this is the mess hall. So it's like a restaurant. And Nat Pendleton is looking for Lou, and they keep missing each other, going in and out. And Bud gets involved, going in and out. And then finally, Nat Pendleton is in the middle, and both Bud and Lou open the doors on him, causing him to, of course, cross his eyes and act unconscious. But anyway, it's a very funny scene, beautifully timed. But then we get to the star routine in this sequence. They are getting ready for a big party to say goodbye to everybody. And there's a big, long table that they were going to, it was makeshift. It's going to be a makeshift table. They were going to use 2 sawhorses underneath the table, so it would sit there very comfortably. They would put a tablecloth over it and set the table. Well, Lou absentmindedly moves one of the seahorses, as he calls them. Bud's like, no, it's a sawhorse. No, it's a seahorse. We're on a ship. But anyway, it turns out that there's just the one sawhorse, and the table tips. It's like a teeter-totter, like a seesaw. But it's so beautifully done, so beautifully timed.
Yes.
Every time Lou puts on a heavy thing and you know the other side's going to go up, Bud puts something of equal weight on the other side. So they don't know it's going up and down. And they do this several times back and forth, and it's just beautiful. It's silent comedy by 2 of the best comedians working. So this is really good. They put a cake at the end of the table, and when Bud takes something off the other end, the cake goes up and hits Lou in the face and hits him in the nose or on the chin. And Bud's, admonishing him. What are you doing? I told you, this is for the soldiers. You shouldn't eat the cake. And of course, it turns around and it happens to Bud. So when Sergeant Collins comes in, the cake is ready to be propelled through the air, landing on target. He yells at them. He stands at attention because his superior officer comes in, and Lou puts something heavy on the table, and the cake flies out of the picture. It's so funny the way the cake flies, and the timing of how it hits Sergeant Collins is just hilarious. It's perfect. It's perfect editing, and he gets covered. It's very funny. It is a very, very funny punchline. And every time he gets covered or he's found with his pants off or whatever it is, there's always a superior officer nearby to catch him. And of course, he gets admonished for it when it's really not his fault. But anyway, he's just wonderful. I have to say about him, though, we talked about him during Buck Privates, and I told you about his Olympic scandal at the time that people thought he should have gotten the gold, but he didn't. But this is his last movie. He disappeared. He died 20 years later. So he had 20 years of retirement away from movies. And I'm just thinking he must have saved his money because he must have made a nice dollar. He was definitely a character star. Yeah. In movies, at MGM especially. So he must have gotten a good salary. And he must have invested well. 20 years away, and nobody knows. I can't find anything about him after that. Yeah, it's quite a mystery, especially for someone who was so prominent in films, from pre-codes all the way up. So anyway, this is his last film. And from what he takes in this film, I don't blame him. He is definitely the foil, the brunt. So anyway, they do that marvelous scene with the table. And here's the story. Now, we've spoken about Robert Lees, who is one of the 2 writers that I love so much, but he was definitely full of it. I always said that because of Lou's conservative Republican ways, Robert Lees just didn't like him and made up stories about him and talked down about him, assuming that he was always on the set. And he wasn't. He was not on the set. But yet he made up these stories. And here's one. He said that for this table, Universal built this mechanical table that would move at the press of a button that Charlie Barton would control off camera, and it just wasn't working. It would break down, and it was terrible, and Universal was so stupid. And then I suggested, why don't we just have a guy underneath and a light cue underneath him? So every time he needed to tip it, a light would go on, and he would do that. And that was my idea. Wrong. Can you imagine? Where did he come up with this?
Wow.
And no, he was not there. He was not sitting by Charlie Barton's side. He was writing other movies. Anyway, that's the story behind that. But, let's face it. It wasn't brain surgery to make that thing work.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do the kitchen stuff. The flying cake is the end of that. And then we cut to Aunt Sylvia, Joan Falon, and little Evie doing a classic Abbott and Costello / John Grant joke. And she's terrific.
If we'd only give him time, he'd fix everything. He's the smartest man in the outfit. He is? Mm-hmm. Sergeant Collins said nobody could teach him anything.
Probably goes back to minstrel days. But anyway, we're back on the demobbing line, and Lou sees a shorter line. And he says to Bud, I'm not waiting here. I'm going to go over there. And he gets online, and it's the line for the people who are being signed in to the Army. And he doesn't realize this. And he gets on the shorter line. And maybe we can play a soundbite from this, because that's a funny joke.
All right, boys, take your shirts off. Off with the shirts, everybody.
What's your hurry, Bud? Keep your shirt on.
You just told me to take my shirt off.
I told you to keep your shirt on, taking your shirt off.
How can I keep my shirt on and take my shirt off? Pardon me. Is your name Abbott?
Okay, so for the people who think that Lou imitated Curly from the Three Stooges, which I think is just asinine, he does imitate Joe Besser at this point. They were very good friends, and I know Joe used to take it as a compliment. But he did. He was like, silly boy. And he even does the hand gesture and all that. But that leads to the punchline to this scene. Lou, little realizing that he's on the wrong line, is getting shots, inoculations. Every time he turns around, they hit him with a new needle. And it's very funny because every time he turns, you see the needles come in. And then finally at the end, you see a guy with the world's longest needle. And Lou says very cleverly, he says, I didn't want to spend my whole day getting stuck here. And the sergeant says, well, this is the end. And of course, the needle goes into his end before Bud comes and takes him away. And of course, Bud puts his arm around him and touches and touches where the shot was made, causing Lou to scream in pain. But anyway, okay, so little Evie is waiting in the immigration office. There is a immigration man at the desk who meets with her and says, go wait in the other room. So she goes to wait in the other room. The door is closed, and the other guy's shift ends, and a new guy comes in who hasn't met the little girl and hasn't looked at the paperwork yet on his desk. So he's completely in the dark at this point. She's looking out the window at some kids playing ball in the street, and one of them hits the softball right through the window where she is. And she reaches down and picks up the ball and is about to climb to the window to throw the ball back when the new guy comes in and catches her and thinks it's one of the kids from the street below. Very clever boys. And he's like, get out of here. What are you doing? Well, you shouldn't be doing that. Take your ball and go. And she leaves, right? Which is very sweet. She's very smart. She's an intelligent actor. She really is. I'm surprised she didn't do more. But anyway, she leaves. And of course, the guy sits down, looks at the paperwork, and realizes, I just let this illegal alien out onto the street at the mercy of Donald Trump. Oh, no, wait a minute. That would be now. I'm sorry. So she's free and easy. She's gone. And what are Bud and Lou doing at this point? They're back to selling ties on the street. And again, this is one of my favorite sections. You look at it, Bud and Lou are back, and they do this whole scene where Bud tries to hypnotize Lou. Now, I never quite understood this, okay? Why is he hypnotizing him?
Well, actually, he says it, but the line is thrown away so quickly. I had missed it a few times, but this last viewing, Bud says to the guys who have gathered around, now it would be very easy for me to influence you to buy these ties. It's very easy. I could just hypnotize you into. In fact, let me show you. You have a volunteer.
I still think it's kind of lame.
Oh, big time, yes.
But it does make for some funny stuff.
Oh, yes.
Oh, his touching Lou's face as he's hypnotizing him. Oh my God! And then some of the lines Lou comes out with, I'm trying to put you to sleep. I just woke up. Boy, this was a short day. One of the guys off to the left, and you only see part of his face, is a guy by the name of Brooks Benedict, and he was an actual featured actor in films, mostly pre-code, but then inexplicably became an extra. He's found in like 3 million movies. He's like Cyril Ring from The Coconuts, Harvey Yates.
Yep.
He actually had lines. He had a role in that film, and then eventually he just became an extra, a paid extra. And I suppose, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe there was drinking involved or some sort of thing that kept them from their trajectory, Yeah. But he always fascinated me. I always look for Brooks Benedict. He's the rival to Eddie Quillen in the 1932 version of Girl Crazy with Wheeler and Woolsey. Yeah. I'm sure everyone knew that. This is why I can't get along in foreign countries.
There you go.
I can't do it here. Why? Never mind foreign countries. So anyway, they're doing the big hypnotism routine. And it always ends with Bud spitting in Lou's face. Now, I remember Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy doing something very, very similar.
Yep.
And ending in the same punchline. And Bud and Lou were actually featured on the Chase and Sanborn Hour with Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy.
Yeah.
And at the end, Lou gives out with a like he's going to spit in Bud's face. And that's what Charlie McCarthy would do at the end of this routine. So anyway, they do their version of it, and it works very well. Somebody runs back to get Sergeant Collins, who just happens to be getting a shave down the street and has half of the cream still on his face and no jacket. He still has the bib around his neck, and he goes running to catch the guys. They get away. He trips over the ties, the suitcase, just like he did in Buck Privates. And our old friend, Donald Jumping Butterballs McBride, shows up as his superior officer. And, of course, poor Sergeant Collins gets admonished for not being in uniform, for having cream on his face and all of this. So he is immediately demoted to a less busy atmosphere, you might say. He knows that Bud and Lou are at large and that he has to be diligent about that. But in the meantime, they team up with Evie again. Evie finds them, and there is a park bench scene. I call them park bench scenes because they take place on park benches. Yeah. And I base it on A Night at the Opera. And it's an old trope, a screenwriting trope, when everything looks bleak. You cut to this park bench where they're all trying to get an idea. They come up with something outlandish, and they go running out to make it happen. Well, this is sort of that, their park bench scene. And it's Bud, Lou, and little Evie. Now, interestingly, John Grant breaks up a joke that they used in Pardon My Sarong. And then eventually in their live TV show, their film TV show. And they might have even, they softened it for TV. Here's the joke. I'd rather marry a homely girl. But why would you want to marry a homely girl? Well, a pretty girl's liable to run away. Well, a homely girl's liable to run away. He says, yeah, but who cares? Now, it's a pretty, I guess, sexist, you would say, nowadays, maybe not politically correct.
Yeah.
But they softened it to poor and rich. I'd rather marry a poor girl, right? It's still the same thing, but it's not insulting. It's more pedestrian, I might say. But I will say that at this point, they had to teach little Beverly to do this sort of burlesque routine. And there is some footage sent to me by Kevin Brownlow of Bud actually given the job to teach little Evie, Beverly Simmons, this joke and the proper way to say it. And I could put this on now. It arrived yesterday. Hold on. Let me see. I'm going over my cassette tapes. Here we are. Putting that in. Good. All right. Here we go. All right, listen to me. I've been in burlesque for years and years and years, long time, long before Lou. So I'm going to teach you how to say this joke. Thank you, Uncle Bud. I really want to learn how to do this correct. All right, just listen to me, all right? This is how you do it. Okay. I'd rather marry a homely girl. But, Uncle Bud, why would... Quiet! What are you doing? You're breaking up the timing of the joke. Now listen to me. I'd rather marry a homely girl. Why would you want to marry... Quiet! What are you crying for? You don't cry in this bit. This is not a crying bit. What are you, Stan Laurel, for crying out loud? All right, let's try it again. I'd rather marry a homely girl. Quiet! What are you doing? Oh, wait. Oh, the studio policeman's coming this way. I've got to go. That's all we have. But I have to say, despite the violence involved, she really did a nice job. Bud did his work very well. And I'm just very grateful to Mr. Brownlow for that footage, and I know Jerry is as well.
Yeah.
This is one of the joys of my life. Anyway, that out of the way. Yes. We have our park bench scene, and we find out that in order for the boys to adopt little Evie, they have to have a good job and they have to be married, or at least one of them has to be married. And this is one of my favorite jokes in the whole.
Hey, remember what that man said? We've got to get married. We have to get married? Mm-hmm. Oh, Slicker. You wouldn't marry me, would you?
Now, don't get silly. You ever hear of anyone marrying a man?
Yes, sir.
Who?
My mother.
Yep.
He's really touched about it. It wouldn't be half as funny if he wasn't so touched. Anyway, that's just wonderful stuff. So we meet Tom Brown. Now, Tom Brown, long career. When I was a child, I knew Tom Brown. I enjoyed his performances. Born in 1915 in New York City, passed away in 1990. He was a child model from the age of 2. He did Buster Brown ads and a few others. He was in RKO's very first talking film called Syncopation, which I think is kind of clever. And that one of the stars was one of my dear friends, Dorothy Lee, the Wheeler and Woolsey girl.
Yeah.
And Dorothy and I were very close towards the end of her life. There's a wonderful book about her. It's called Dorothy Lee, the Wheeler and Woolsey girl, written by Ted Okuda and Jamie Brotherton. Both friends of mine, and I wrote the foreword, and it's a wonderful book. So it's there on Amazon, and it's a great story. Dorothy was aces, just aces. So Tom Brown, he had an incredible World War II record. He was a paratrooper, and not only did he get the Croix de Guerre from France, he got the Bronze Star in Washington. And then during the Korean scuffle, he was a lieutenant colonel. Apparently, he got along very well in the military, Mr. Brown. He eventually drifted off into television roles, and he makes an appearance on one of my favorite TV shows from the 1970s, and that's Ellery Queen with Jim Hutton and David Wayne.
And David Wayne.
That was television at its best. Just wonderful. Do you remember every time we got to the point where we had to guess the killer, Jim
Yes.
Hutton, as Ellery Queen, would turn to the camera and just say, okay, now these are the clues, blah, blah, blah. Commercial break comes on and we get to guess.
Yes. Yes.
What a wonderful show. Just a wonderful show. So anyway, Tom Brown did all those things and again passed away in 1990. But what a guy. What a guy. And he gives a great performance. And Bud and Lou were his best man at his wedding right after this movie was shot. So they were good buddies. So anyway, they do the park bench thing. We meet Tom Brown. Evie gets it into Lou's head that Aunt Sylvia would marry him. so they could adopt her. And this is, again, Joan Falon does something that just makes me laugh. When they open the door and the three of them are standing outside Joan's apartment, she sees little Evie. Evie, what are you doing here? And she says something about, blah, blah, blah. They've got to get married. And she looks at Bud in the hopes that it's him, tall. I never thought he was better looking than Lou, but still tall and a bit more adult looking. When she says, no, this is Uncle Herbie. And you see her face slowly shrinks into this face of disappointment, this mask of disappointment. And it works beautifully. I don't know how many times they did it, but it works beautifully. So anyway, they're invited in and they're sitting here. And this is when they do the, I'd rather marry a homely girl. Why? And they split it into three. I like that. Bud does the initial straight line, then Lou's line, then Evie takes a line, and then Lou gives the punchline. It's quite nice, actually. And I love when we find out what Tom Brown does for a living. He races midgets. And Lou says, why don't you race with people your own size? Great joke. So here's the deal. As soldiers, Bud and Lou are supposed to get a $4,000 loan from a bank because they're veterans. Can you imagine? They don't give it to them. They get a loan. So they're going to do that. They're going to go and get a loan so they could get Tom Brown's midget car that he built on his own out of hock, basically, so he could, race it and make the money. So they go. This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. Bud and Lou go to a bank and try to get that loan so they could make the car. They have a little model of the car that when you push the wheels, it starts up and you actually see the way it works. They have all the blueprints and everything else. Now, wonderful, stoic, stodgy Charles Trowbridge plays the banker. And he's wary about it, but he's interested. And it turns out that Lou starts the car and it starts backfiring and it sounds like a gun. And the people from outside the office only see silhouettes because of the shaded glass. And it looks like Lou is holding up the bank and shooting everybody in the office. So the cops run in and it becomes a big mess. And of course, the Charles Trowbridge, our friend, says, "Get out of here." So they don't get their money. Oh, by the way, the homely joke.
Yeah.
You know where it was first credited?
No.
And to whom? Benjamin Franklin. That's how old that joke is. Honest to God. Yes. They trace it back to Benjamin Franklin. Seriously, I think that's so cool. Yeah. Well, you have to think of some things while you're flying a kite, It's not so exciting, really. Ben, what are you doing? I'm writing jokes. Leave me alone. Now, I'd rather marry a homely girl. But anyway, that's all history. I'm surprised they left it out of 1776. The musical.
I know.
That should have been there. But anyway, they're at Aunt Sylvia's apartment now, and they have no place to go. So Aunt Sylvia offers them a place to sleep. It's her bathroom. Lou tends to take the opening song and fit it to other situations throughout this movie, and I love it. He's singing, "We're going to bed, we're going to bed, this will be the first time I get," whatever. And as he's making up the bathtub with a blanket and a pillow, Bud comes over and hits him telling him that he's sleeping in the bathtub. And Lou actually falls into the bathtub and thinks that Bud is helping him. God forbid. Oh, thank you. This is so nice of you. What do you mean? Get out of there. And he pulls him out. So Bud gets into the bathtub. It's his territory. And Lou goes outside onto the fire escape. And he hooks up the blanket with clothespins. And it becomes like a hammock. And he's safely sleeping in this hammock over the safe part of the fire escape. Now, morning comes. One of my favorite scenes. And Bud gets the Academy Award here. It's morning. And the line that Lou is attached to is also attached to this woman's laundry. And she's right across the way. And there is this gaping space between the two buildings where if you fell, you would die. So she's pulling in her laundry, and in the meantime, she's also pulling Lou into the danger zone. So when he wakes up, the first thing he does is look down, and that's it. He just panics, and he screams and yells. And that brings out the woman's husband, the jealous husband. And this is absolutely hilarious. Oh, this is what happens the minute I turn my back. I go to work, and this guy sneaks in through the fire escape on the lawn. He calls him a clothesline Casanova. Which I love. Bud comes out to help, and poor Lou is panicking. He's ready to fall. Really nice work here, by the way. The photography and the rear projection is just fabulous. But Bud and this guy, the jealous husband, his name is Eustace, by the way. I listened closely. Eustace, no! And they're pulling Lou back and forth. He wants to punch him out, and before he can get there, Bud pulls him back. So he's going back and forth, and it's absolutely hilarious. And Bud, of course, is no help at all. The guy takes out a knife. I'll cut the line. And Bud's like, yeah, I'd like to see you do it. And of course, he cuts the line, and poor Lou goes flying down through the window below in their building on that side, and ends up in a bed that's a Murphy bed, and it goes into the wall and then comes down again. And whose bed should it be but Sergeant Collins, Nat Pendleton, who is wearing his BVDs, or what are those called? His
union suit, yeah.
His union suit, right, in the police union. So he chases Lou out of the building, out into the street, dressed in his skivvies. And, of course, who should show up? Jumping on his butterballs, but Donald McBride, who admonishes the poor man and demotes him even further. Or farther? Anything farther? And that's how that scene ends. And it's just wonderful. And I had to mention the two people, the husband and wife, who never get mentioned in any books or anything else, but they are just wonderful. The husband is William Haade, and it's a long 2 A's, Haade. And he was born in 1903 in New York City, only lived to be 63. He died in 1966. He was in 250 films from 1937 to 1957. You've seen him 8 million times. Always a tough guy, always a gangster's, assistant or whatever. I can't think of the words. Or a big mug or a cop, somebody, a foil usually. But anyway, he interestingly, he was a construction boss. That was his job. And then in 1936, he was hired as a technical advisor on a Broadway show called Iron Man about construction workers. And eventually, he made such an impression that the director said, you know what, you're going to be in this. You're in this now. So he became a Broadway actor and then went to Hollywood in 1937 and never stopped working. The guy was amazing. Wow. So that was him. He was Eustace. And his wife, Jana de Loos, Loos. And she was born in 1908 in the Netherlands, lived to 1987, lived to be 78 years old, mostly did uncredited roles in a lot of movies, Universal especially. And she's in one of my favorite Invisible Man movies. The Invisible Man's Revenge in 1944, starring John Carradine. Actually, John Hall plays the invisible one. John Carradine is in it. He's the professor that makes him invisible. Evelyn Ankers. Let me just sigh for a second. And Gail Sondergaard, who was recently in Time of Their Lives.
Yes.
Melody. And in the comic lead, Leon Errol. In The Invisible Man's Revenge. I love Leon Errol. And he shows up in The Noose Hangs High right after their next film. And boy, is he great in that movie.
Oh, yes.
So she's great. She died in 1987, did a lot of work in movies, all uncredited. Now, we have buying a home. They have to have a home in order to adopt Evie. So this is the next step. And Joe Kirk is the salesman, Mr. Bachikaloop, Lou's brother-in-law. And he sells them this beautiful home for only $750. Now, that's very, very cheap for a home even then. But boy, they went for it, and Bud puts his hand in his pocket and says, "Herbie, pay him." And Lou ends up paying, and before you know it, they tow away the facade of the house, and what they really bought was a decrepit old bus. Not even a transfer. So they have this old bus that they bought, and they decide that the way to get the money they need in order not only to fix up the bus as a home, but in order to get the midget car out of hock and all that, they decide to get in touch with their army buddies. And they do. They invite everyone over. They make the bus look like a great little home, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And interestingly, there's all these pictures on the walls, like 8x10 pictures. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, one of them is an ad for the movie Dead of Night, the British horror anthology film that's so wonderful. The one with the, haunted ventriloquist dummy. But there it is up there because it's one of the films they brought from England when they became Universal International.
Boy.
And I say it that way because they wanted it to be upscale, for crying out loud. So I found that very interesting. There they were trying to push this movie in an Abbott and Costello film. What does that say? So anyway, they are there. And I don't know if you noticed this, Jerry, and I'm sure you did. I'm going to guess that you did. Okay. One of the soldiers is Jimmy Dodd from the Mickey Mouse.
It's the only movie I've ever seen him in. I'd only ever seen him on the Mickey Mouse Club.
He made quite a few movies. And this one, he's very prominent as one of the guys. Gets a few lines and everything. Yeah. But anyway, so they're there, and they're talking about this midget car, and all the guys are excited. They're all going to become partners, and it works out. It actually works out until we get a visit from Sergeant Collins, who happens to be working this shift now. And believe me, this is out in the weeds. This is out of the mainstream. It's not even like near a small lake. So he comes in, and of course they have to hide little Evie. He finds her little doll, which Lou claims as his own. And eventually he sits down underneath a very large photo of Bud, Lou, and little Evie, and it falls on his head and knocks him out. So what happens? The immigration guy, Don Beto, an actor I really like, who worked for years, very prominent in Night of the Hunter, the Charles Lawton directed, wonderfully dark film, beautiful film. But Don Beto is the immigration guy, and he shows up with Donald Jumping Butterballs McBride to take the girl away so she could, get sent home. Well, everybody's leaving. They're pretending that they're moving out. So they're taking everything out. They're taking the furniture out. They're taking even little Evie, disguised. She does this thing that was very Little Rascals-like, where she's on top of Lou's shoulders. Yeah. And they put the wrapping around her so she looks like an adult with a very small head. And as she's leaving, they ask her, did you leave anything behind? And she says, well, if you look underneath that wrapping there, I think you'll find something that belongs to you. And of course, it's poor Sergeant Collins who tries to explain why he's there and what's going on. And of course, they don't listen to him. And I think this is where they take his badge away and they suspend him. So poor Sergeant Collins is on suspension. Now they do their pre-finale. I call it their pre-finale. They paid for the car to be out of hock, but they have to get into the garage. And unfortunately, they are warned, or fortunately, they are warned that ex-Sergeant Collins, who is not a cop at this point, and two of his, henchmen are waiting for them to come in so they can, take them in on a citizen's arrest and beat the crap out of them, actually. So this becomes a Three Stooges scene. I call this their Three Stooges scene. I've seen the Three Stooges do this numerous times.
Yes.
Right? In an enclosed warehouse-like area. They have to avoid the three crooks, and, there's ins and outs and people getting hit on the head with hammers and, you name it. But originally, when they come in, Sergeant Collins and his two henchmen are all asleep in a car. And obviously, they've been waiting a long time, so they went to sleep. And Lou goes over to hit Sergeant Collins with a hammer, and he puts his hand on the where the window is open on the car, and Sergeant Collins puts his hand on top of Lou's. He's still asleep, but Lou has to deal with getting his hand disenfranchised from Sergeant Collins's much larger hand, and it's very funny. And then Lou eventually realizes he's going to have to hit it with a hammer, and of course, Sergeant Collins moves his hand and Lou hits his own hand. But anyway, everybody wakes up. There's a grand chase. They do tend to subdue their pursuers, but not before they do the tire bit. There's 3 stacks of tall tires, right? 3 tall stacks of tires. Sergeant Collins sees Lou run towards there, and he looks down into one of the tire things, and Lou comes out of the one on the end. Sergeant Collins sees him, runs over, Lou ducks, he looks into the tires, and Lou comes out of the other one on the other end. Now, my writing partner, Matthew Conium, really couldn't figure out how this was done because there were no cuts. Obviously, there were no cuts. But also, obviously, it was Lou's double. I think his name was Irv Gould. And he did all the doubling for Lou in this movie. And if you really watch it, you see that the second guy is not Lou. But, surprise of surprises, it's Bud that gets the punchline. He pops out of the middle row of tires when Sergeant Collins says,
Where did he go? Where did he go?
That's what I want to know.
So it's a very nice touch. But anyway, all the pursuers are knocked out, and they take the car out, and they are ready to get into the big race. Now, the big race, a couple of things. Oh, the Bugs Bunny reference, I'm forgetting.
Yes.
When Lou comes up out of the tires, he has a carrot in his hand, and he does the, "What's up, Doc?" which I love, He could have done Woody Woodpecker, They belong to Universal. Yep. In fact, when they were moving everything out of the bus earlier in the scene, I noticed a Andy Panda doll, which was Universal. So, there's a little tip of the hat to Walter Lantz. Mm-hmm. The race scenes, number one, are announced by Milburn Stone, the actor, who later went on to be the Doctor in Gunsmoke for many years. And it was filmed at Gilmore Stadium in Los Angeles. And we're talking right in the heart of Los Angeles on Beverly Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue. Now, if you're LA savvy, that is like right in the middle of everything. So it must have been quite a popular place. And it's a beautiful setting. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's Gilmore Stadium. Tom Brown drives his car and wins the race that gets him into the big race. What would that be called, Jerry?
The qualifier.
Thank you. The qualifier, which sounds like a Denzel Washington movie. Qualifier 2 and qualifier 8. The qualifier that ate Pittsburgh. But anyway, so he wins that. But then he is pursued by a now very angry Sergeant Collins, who has his police uniform on again. And he's with Jumping Butterballs, and they're ready to arrest Tom Brown and take Evie away. So when Lou sees this, and he sees that the car is empty, he gets in, and he commandeers this little midget racer that goes faster than you can imagine. It's just wonderful. And of course, Bud yells out, "He doesn't know how to drive." And I just wanted to say, look who's talking. Bud doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah.
But, except Lou crazy. But anyway, Lou is off, and this is a wonderful scene. This is the big finale, and there's even a story attached to it. But it is a beautiful, beautiful scene. He eventually is led off the track and is on to the regular street in this beautiful little mini car. He's going underneath trucks. He's just missing people. It's just beautiful. At one point, he drives through a billboard sign, and the sign gets attached to his car like airplane wings. So the car starts rising and flying over traffic. And it's just, I'm sure Elon Musk was watching this when he thought of the flying car. Sounds like a wrestling move. But anyway, so Lou is like going up and down and flying. And here's the story. He crashes through a wall, the wall of a theater. Now, I'm sure you read what the marquee said on the side of the wall: Abbott and Costello in Romeo Jr. Now, let's go back to who done it. They cut a scene where Lou is Romeo and Juliet is Mary Wicks, and they never used it. They didn't use the sequence. So I have a feeling that this was left over, and they filmed this. They actually shot this and then discarded it. Lou flies through the wall of the theater that's showing this movie, Abbott and Costello in Romeo Jr. He is through the screen, but the screen is showing the movie. And it's Lou doing the balcony scene with young Juliet. And Lou's screen character and Lou's actual character start talking to each other. And it was very complicated to shoot. Lighting-wise, timing-wise, editing-wise, it took a long time. And apparently it ended with the movie Lou punching the actual Lou in the nose. So it's all cut. It's all gone. All we have now is everybody catching up to Lou in the theater, and Lou is actually holding his nose. I mean, like it's in pain, not like it smells. Yeah. And so you know where that came from. It's from the scene that was cut. So that would have been really nice. I'm really sorry they cut that.
Yeah.
But it leads to the ending, which is a wonderful ending. It carries on the running gag in the movie where Lou keeps tripping over his belt. So Jumping Butterballs comes up with the idea that, well, first of all, Evie is going to be adopted by Tom Brown and Joan Falon. All very good and nice. They're going to get married. And Bud and Lou are given a job on the police force as rookies. And Sergeant Collins starts crying. And then we dissolve to the big parade of rookies, and Evie and Tom and Joan are waving off to the side. Bud is right up front, marching proudly. And in the back, of course, is Lou, whose belt slowly slips down to his feet, and he does the last of his front forward falls for a wonderfully satisfying ending to a wonderfully satisfying film. I don't know how many people agree with me that it's actually a better film than Buck Privates. Buck Privates may be a more important film in their canon because it was their, Universal saying, hey guys, look what you got. But this one, it's actually a better film. It's actually a better story. They are central to it, unlike Buck Privates. So that's the way I feel about it. I just think it's one of their better films.
Well, yes, and I agree because it is a story. Buck Privates, in essence, is kind of a plot, and they pretty much plug routines into it.
Right.
Whereas this one, it's a full story. It's a fully involving them from start to finish. As a film, it is better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because that Richard McCaulay I mentioned earlier did very little to shape this story. But Lou, especially, was asking for better writers. He wanted better situations. He wanted movies, real movies rather than what they were doing.
Yeah.
So I've got to give him credit for that. I've got to give Eddie Sherman credit for that. Bud was even along on that. But I have to say that Robert Arthur was, like I say, very college educated. He was an art collector. The new bosses at Universal were Universal International, let's say, were very, very, high on the hog, as they say. And Bud and Lou were still playing cards and yelling at each other and, cussing at each other and, laughing as they blew lines. And, then there was Bobby Barber. So there you go. Buck Privates Come Home. Terrific sequel.
Yep.
And one of the very few sequels that are as good, if not better, than the original.
Agreed.
Jerry, what do we got coming up? Number 21.
Number 21. We're kind of over the hump here in some ways, as far as these films are concerned.
True.
And we're back to formula with this one, and got a couple coming up that are pretty much sticking to the new formula, back to the new formula.
Yes. Yeah.
So, looking forward to those. Our next one of my all-time favorite character actresses.
Marjorie Main.
Yes. Oh, she is so
my
good.
My main squeeze. Yeah, she, Marjorie had broken through after years at MGM. She came to Universal to do The Egg and I, which turned out to be Universal's biggest hit that year.
Yep.
And it started the whole Ma and Pop Kettle series, which I've only recently seen.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about it next week. There's a wonderful book written by two of my friends, Lon and Deborah Davis. And it's an excellent book. It goes over each film, all the stories, everything else, the cast list. And we'll talk all about that next week when we look at The Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap, one of my favorite Abbott and Costello movies, honest to goodness. I tend to like Westerns as it is, and this one would work without Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
To be honest. So we'll take a look at that, talk about it. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and feel better. I did this with a virus and a very bad cold. So please forgive me if I seem a little lackluster, but I should be right back on my game in a couple of weeks when we do Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap. Jerry, always a pleasure, as usual.
Nick, right back at you. And to be, well, I don't know, to be or not to be. I just want to...
Another good movie.
Yeah. If you hadn't told me that you weren't feeling well, I never would have noticed. So kudos to you, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It's that performer's adrenaline thing that happens.
Yeah.
No matter how sick you are, the minute you step on stage, you throw up on the leading lady. But anyway, let's move on. And that's good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And remember, if you're listening on YouTube, I'm really going to push this now. Please subscribe to my channel. All of the episodes are here. Some other things I've done are on here. But please press like and press subscribe. That would do us a world of good. And you would really be helping in our cause to spread the word about Bud and Lou and just how great they were and are. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Jerry, for being you. And I don't mean that in the ovine sense, but goodbye, everyone, and thanks for listening.
All right, now turn the wheel left. Left? Right. Which way do you want me to turn? To the left. To the left. That's right. How can the left be right? If I turn to the left, that's left. No, that's right. You want me to turn to the left? To the left. That's right. How can I turn it left if you want me to go to right? The right's over that way. No, listen, I don't want you to turn it right. I want you to turn it left. You want me to turn it left? Right. Get it right. Come on, now, what do you do? Which way do you want me to turn the wheel? To the left. To the left. Right. Now, look, Slicker, that's the same trouble I had with my feet in the army. Oh, come on!